Have you ever just stared at a piece of Lua code and wondered what in the world does all of this mean? Well, don't worry, you're definitely not alone in that, but there are a number of tools that can help us a lot with decoding Lua, so to speak. One of those is the syntax highlighting that Visual Studio Code provides, which I'm going to explain to you in detail. Another thing is there are several extensions that can be very helpful for doing that. Whether you're somebody who just received a piece of code from somebody else that you need to look at and make some little small tweak to, or if you're actually trying to learn Lua for yourself, I'm going to show you all of that and more in this video. So to start off with, I'm going to show you how to load a plugin into GrandMA3, just in case you don't know. This is the plugins pool in GrandMA3, and I like to have a view somewhat like this with my command line history and my system monitor, just to show me kind of what's going on when I run my plugins for testing. And so these pool objects, you create like any other pool objects. You click Insert New Component Lua, Edit, and you can type code here. I do not recommend writing code in this editor right here, but you will need to paste it in here, click Save, and then click on the plugin to run it. So now that we have covered that, the software that I recommend using for Lua scripting is Visual Studio Code. Now, if you don't have Visual Studio Code, you need to download it. It's going to change everything, and everything we're talking about today is going to have to do with the default syntax highlighting in Visual Studio Code. So download that, and then the other tool you're definitely going to want to have is the MA3 API extension. This is something that is designed to work with GrandMA3. It is so helpful, completely changed the way I write code. Highly recommend. It's totally free, just download it. And also, there are a couple of other extensions that I do use. I have these ones that pertain to Git, which is a very useful tool for keeping track of your code and keeping track of different versions so you can revert back to it and such. But if you're just getting started, at least get these two, which have to do with linting, and they will give you some extra help with syntax highlighting and things like that so that you can see what you're doing. I will also state that some of the syntax highlighting stuff I have going on here is coming from some of the extensions that I have installed. So if you do not have all the exact same extensions installed as I do, you may see some slightly different things than what I'm seeing, although most of it will still be pretty similar. You'll also want to open a folder in Visual Studio Code like this. Just navigate to the folder on your PC that you want to keep your plugins in. You can just create one in your documents or wherever you would like to and open that and then make all of your plugins in there. When you're working in files in Visual Studio Code, you'll want to make sure that you're working with .lua files. This file extension just tells Visual Studio Code that you are using the Lua language, so it will use Lua language syntax highlighting. You can also open files directly by clicking on them in your file explorer, but I like to keep a folder open so that I can just click on them here in the sidebar. I do find that easier as a general rule. Now I am going to open just kind of a random file that I've used for my Lua for GrandMA3 series, and we are going to talk about the syntax highlighting. When you look at a program like this, and this is why you want to open in Visual Studio Code, there's a lot going on here. There is a whole lot of different code here, and you might be wondering, what does all of this even mean? It's not English. How do I interpret it? Well, the first step to know what you're seeing is to look at the colors. Now, a string is simply a string of text that is interpreted as plain text. So this is text that you're going to perhaps put in a pop-up or use in your MA3 system. Whatever the case might be, this is plain text. It's not a command. It's not syntax that is telling the system to do something. Plain text strings are highlighted in orange, and plain text strings are always going to be enclosed in either single quotes or double quotes. That's what tells the system that it is a string. But you'll be able to see quickly, this is a string because it's highlighted in orange. This is a string because it's highlighted in orange, and so on. Now, the next color we're going to talk about is white. White is used for special characters. like the comma, the equal sign, these two little dots. If you have any kind of, this one right here, if you have any plus or minus or multiply or divide symbols, those kinds of things, those are going to be white. It's basically an operator to tell the systems to do something with these items. So the comma is separating items in a list. The equal sign is saying this is equal to that. Or if you have two of them together, it's comparing them and seeing if they are equal. If you are doing this, that is basically saying not equal. The two dots together is going to concatenate two things, so combine them into one string in this case. And that is what the white refers to. So it is all these special characters. Then this color right here, which is almost white and even looks white on some screens, but it is not quite white. As you can see, it's kind of a light green. That is the color for numbers. This is a number, an integer. This is not in a string. If we enclose this in quotes, then it becomes a string, it turns orange. But when it is not enclosed in quotes, it is simply a number by itself. And so it's that color to indicate that. The next color we're going to go over is yellow, or maybe you could call it off-white. That's this color right here, which you can see our word message boxes, is object valid, data pool, insert, printf. All of these are this same off-white or light yellow color. And that color is basically just telling us that this is a function. And whatever follows it is going to be enclosed in parentheses, because when you call a function, and you can also have empty parentheses like with this one or with this one, but when you call a function, you have to put arguments or data for that function in parentheses. So you have a function followed by parentheses, but you can see quickly where your functions are because they are this color. And if you have absolutely no idea what a function is, basically it's a separate piece of code that does something. So you give it some information and it does something, and then you come back into the rest of your code after it does its job. So whenever you call a function, for instance, you can see these parentheses are bright yellow. In this one, we have an if statement, which we'll go over that in a little bit, but we're enclosing a condition here in parentheses. So the outer parentheses are bright yellow. Now within that, we're calling a function, and that function has data enclosed in parentheses. Those parentheses are pink. If I were to remove this one would turn yellow. The outer set is always yellow. The next set is pink, the next set is blue, and then we go back to bright yellow. So it's just basically to show you which set of parentheses it is. So I can look at this and I can see this is my inner parentheses, then blue to blue is the next set, pink to pink is the next, and yellow is the outer parentheses. Believe me, if you've ever worked in a code editor where you just have multiple sets of parentheses and they are all the same color, you will appreciate this so much because you can very quickly see where different information starts and ends. And the same goes with braces and brackets, any type of thing like that. The more different ones you have inside, even if you're mixing types, they change color so you can see which ones are which. On to the next color. This light blue right here is the color for variables. A variable is anything that you create and you say this identifier right here is equal to something, and you give data to that variable. Then you can change that variable, you can use that variable, but you define it. And so this variable right here is being defined to an empty table. That's what the braces mean. So you've set this is an identifier of a variable. Identifiers of variables are shown in blue. So anything in this light blue is user defined. This dark blue right here, you're not going to see super often. It's used to define a variable for, like in this case, we're defining a variable as being local. If you do not define a variable as specifically being local in Lua, it is going to be global by default. And that just means where you can access it. So because I defined this one locally, it cannot be accessed outside of this main function. whereas these other ones that are global and honestly should not be global are accessible absolutely anywhere in your system once you've defined them. That is not safe programming practice. This is something I've actually learned more recently, is that you should not make anything global unless it has to be. But that is what this color means. There are a couple of other uses for this dark blue color, and those are the keywords nil and true and false. So nil is just basically a completely empty value, like this is no value. True and false are conditions that something can be in. So those three words are also displayed in dark blue, the same as local. Next up, let's talk about this blue-green color here. Now, if you do not have the Lua for MA3 extension installed, you will be seeing these coming up as this color, which is very confusing because they are not the same as regular variables. In fact, they're not really variables at all. They kind of are, but not really. So these blue-green color objects are actually strings. They are string identifiers of table values. So when you create a table, which is a variable, it's identified by variable. This is a table, this is a table. We have an identifier. Now within this table, we have several different objects. So we have a value called great people and one called video announcements. These are strings. So this is the value in the table. And currently, it is going to be identified by a number index. So to access this one, we're going to be looking at table sermon defaults index 1. This one is sermon defaults index 2. But you can also define table data with a name rather than a number. And when you do that, that name is going to be this color. So this is technically a string. This is not a variable, but it can be used to identify this. So if we look for message box index title, we get this value confirm. Another important color that you'll see quite a lot is purple. This purple applies to keywords that define actions in most cases, things that are conditional, that kind of thing. So purple is used for function, for the words for, do, and end, if, then. These are basically saying we're going to do these things, and it's a language keyword. So it's displayed in purple. The final color we're going to talk about is this green, and this dark green simply identifies a comment. So anything this dark green color is completely ignored by the system, and you define something as a comment by putting these two dashes in front of it, or you can do a multi-line comment by putting two dashes and then two brackets, and then it's a comment until you put closing brackets. And actually, I said that was the last thing, but that is not the last thing I have to talk about. The last one is this little orange color. It's kind of a pale orange. These go inside of strings, but this is not read literally. When you put this backslash symbol, whatever comes after it is escape, and that just means that this is interpreted as formatting instead of as plain text. And that little dull orange color is identifying that. Now, another thing that will be very useful for you in navigating a Lua programming environment is to understand a little bit about generally what functions are. I talked about how they are a thing which contains other code that takes information and then works with it. But there are several different types of functions. There are Lua library functions that are part of the language. There are GrandMA3 functions that are built into the MA3 API. And then you can also create functions yourself. This is one of the reasons why the Lua for MA3 extension is so helpful, because it gives you information about all of these. You click on the name of a function, and it will give you a whole description of what it works and what parameters it takes. Some have more information than others. This one even has examples. It's super helpful. A lot of this documentation comes from the MA3 user manual in the case of the MA3 functions, but this right here is a Lua library function, and it also explains how it works. And if you create functions, I believe it will show any comments that you put right above the definition of the function. That is super helpful for just knowing what's going on. You see the colors, and then you have the option with this extension to mouse over functions and see what they are doing. Now that you've watched all of this, I hope that that's because you're interested in actually learning about how to write Lua, which means you should go check out my full programming course on YouTube, which is shown on the screen right here. I have videos taking you from start to end of programming. You can watch the crash course video or you can watch the little pieces, and it will teach you everything you need to know to get started in Lua. Let me know what types of videos you would like to see soon. I hope you have a fantastic day and happy programming.